So I want to talk about the expectations for the running back room. And right now it's James Cook, it's Ray Davis, and it's Ty Johnson. I'm actually going to take Ty Johnson sort of out of the equation here. And I just want to have a conversation about James Cook and Ray Davis because I think Ty Johnson will be more of the RB3 in this offense, but who knows? Maybe I'm
Mhm.
wrong and he does have more of a role in the regular season. But James Cook, Ray Davis, do you think it's going to be RB1 James Cook, RB2 Ray Davis? Or do you think it's going to be more of a 1A, 1B situation like we saw in years previous with Singletary Cook, Singletary Moss, etc.?
I don't think it's gonna be a 1A, 1B, at least initially.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's gonna be at least skewed more towards the splits we saw last year with James Cook getting in that he had 237 rushing attempts last year. I think you're gonna see him in that 225 to 250 range again this year. Latavius Murray had 79 rushing attempts last year. I think a bulk of those would go to Ray Davis, 80 rushing attempts for him, maybe 80, maybe closer, pushing closer to 100 potentially for him. So to me, it's still going to be at least a 2-to-1, maybe even closer to 3-to-1 ratio as far as attempts are concerned between James Cook and a guy like Ray Davis. So I would say no, not a 1A, 1B scenario as I'm predicting right now. I think it'll be a similar split to how we saw the running back split last year with maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of an uptick for Ray Davis.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you. I think it's going to be 1-2 to start. I think where you're going to see Ray Davis the most is short yardage situations, goal line situations, and as risky as it seems because he's a rookie, I think that Ray Davis is a considerably better pass protector than the two other guys in the room. It's one of the things that Brandon Beane pointed out in his post-draft press conference. He literally sat there and applauded Ray Davis's ability to pass block. Latavius Murray was the best pass blocker last year. It got him on the field even when fans really didn't want him on the field. Johnson does an admirable job. James Cook struggles in pass pro. So really obvious passing downs, you could see a lot more Ray Davis maybe than you expect. And by season's end, if we do reemphasize the running game and run the ball more than we did last year, I honestly think maybe you could see a 1A, 1B develop between the two of these guys by midseason as the Bills sort of make their playoff push into the back half of the year, as the weather gets colder, as the conditions change. It would not shock me if at the end of the season we're like, whoa, the biggest difference maker on this offense this year was Ray Davis. Like he put us over the top. He was the cherry on top. It really would not surprise me if by season's end that was a talking point.
I mean, I think if you're a Bills fan, you kind of are hopeful that that could happen, right? Because it's not anything that you want to take away from James Cook, but if you
Mm-hmm.
have two guys that you can consistently rely upon, that is a nice thing to have, right? I mean, Latavius Murray had his moments last year where he looked okay, but then kind of faded down the stretch. The Bills went with the Leonard Fournette experiment a little bit. Didn't work. Ty Johnson had good reps, but clearly the Bills didn't expect Ty Johnson to be a true like number two, right? And that's why they drafted Ray Davis. So yes, by midseason, by season's end, if he's kind of elevated his game, he's contributing, like not taking away anything from James Cook, because I expect him to be kind of right in the same range of
Mm-hmm.
numbers that he had last year. We'll talk about that in a second, but it will be a nice outcome for the Bills if Ray Davis does contribute meaningfully offensively, right? And not just for pass protection.
Speaking of the number of carries, James Cook, 237 carries in 2023. Do you expect that number to go up or down for James Cook from 237?
I expect it to be right in that range again. In my
Mm-hmm.
notes, I said between 225 and 250. I think that's a sweet spot for him. You know, if 237, he was only 13 carries away from 250 carries, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
250 carries, I don't think is an unreasonable expectation, but it's not going to shock me if he's slightly below that number. So I'd say, like, I don't think you want to give him a ton more than 250, maybe 260 carries if you really want to
Mm-hmm.
push it. But I think that that 230 to 250 range is a solid range for him, and that's probably where I would project him again this year.
If I were in charge, that's how many carries I would give him. But I'm actually going to say lower, and I'm going to explain my reasoning here. He had 117 carries in 7 games under Joe Brady. So extrapolate over 17 games, that's 284 carries. That's like way, way, way too many carries. I think the Buffalo Bills looked at their backup running backs this past season who averaged 8.5 carries per game in all of 2023. And they're like, man, that's just really not good enough. They're not taking the pressure off James Cook the way we'd like to take the pressure off James Cook. I think that's why you saw Ray Davis drafted relatively high. And you also have Curtis Samuel who can come in and take some carries as well. So
Mhm.
my expectation is more of like 200 to 215. I think it'll be down, but not down too much. I think the Buffalo Bills are going to want to keep James Cook more fresh this season. Joe Marino did a great podcast. I think it was the day that Stephon Diggs was traded. So he's mentioned a couple of times in some of those podcasts afterwards. Hey, a lot of people didn't hear my breakdown of James Cook because Stephon Diggs got traded that day. Go back and listen. And in that podcast, I'm not going to read off the statistics verbatim because he is the one who went out and did that research. You can go listen to that podcast. But to summarize what Joe uncovered was that sort of after that big Dallas game, and after the game after that, sort of James Cook kind of hit a wall and his yards per contact was down. His yards per carry were down. James Cook struggled into the playoffs for the Buffalo Bills, and he saw
Mhm.
his averages decline significantly. So I think the Buffalo Bills want to take some pressure off of James Cook just so he can be more explosive. Like he could
Mhm.
have more yards rushing with less carries this year because he can be more explosive. He can have more all purpose yards this year because if you take pressure off him in the run game, he can go and he can catch the ball more. So I still think James Cook is going to be a major factor in this Buffalo Bills offense, even if his carries are down by 15 or 20, because he can contribute more in the passing game if he's fresher. And you can maybe see some more explosives when he's running the ball because he's got fresher legs. So I think Ray Davis is the key to unlocking an even more explosive James Cook.
I like that take, and then we got a super chat here from Justin
Mhm.
again. It says, "Just don't fumble Ray, or as a
Not in your
rookie,
first
running back,
carry.
you'll be moving into doghouse." Yeah, as James Cook did famously. So, hey, and
The,
in
the
the
good
long
news for
run, it
Ray
worked out
Davis
for
is
him.
the good news for Ray Davis is there's not as much competition as I think James Cook had in that
No.
Buffalo Bills backfield from a couple of years ago. The salary cap has left the options a little bit more limited.
This segment is from the Air Raid Hour podcast. The full show is live every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Cover One YouTube channel. Don't miss out!